Well, thank you so much for joining us to continue the conversation that we've been having on the regular Nevada Week show here online. Dr. Kamen, you were just speaking to some of the specific treatments, and I want to go back to that. You mentioned DBS. Maybe we start there. Dr. Mari, maybe you can give us some more perspective on that treatment itself. It is an invasive treatment. Is it a cure-all here for Parkinson's? Dr. Mari, can you hear me?
Sorry, I lost you for 1 second. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yes. Dr. Kamen mentioned DBS. I wanted to bring more attention to that. We didn't get to talk about that on the show in detail or any form of treatment. So I wanted to revisit that. Can you give us a little information on DBS, what it is? By my research, it seems like somewhat of an invasive treatment. Is it a cure-all for all patients?
So I would like to say that, unfortunately, we don't have a cure-all, DBS or otherwise, at this time. Currently, all the treatments, including medications, including procedures that are currently approved and in use clinically for Parkinson patients are so-called symptomatic. They are aiming to make some symptoms better, more bearable, less disabling. Let it be tremor, let it be motor fluctuations, or one symptom or another. They are making those symptoms better, but they don't necessarily change the underlying disease process, the pathology that eventually leads to the progression of the disease and the development of these symptoms. And DBS is in that realm. It's a symptomatic treatment, and it's an invasive treatment. So along the line with other symptomatic treatments, it is more powerful in some ways. It is also more risky. I often describe the process as we put wires in your brain. Some like we put wires in the heart as a pacemaker. This is a pacemaker for the brain, and a very similar battery is actually driving it. So that's where the analogy ends, but necessarily it is a very complex procedure that needs to be very carefully thought about. It is not a for all, coming back to your question. It is recommended to certain patients who meet certain criteria, who are so-called candidates for this procedure. Now, who is a candidate, and how do we determine that? Well, there's a standard of practice for the determination, and the standard of practice is the so-called multidisciplinary expert panel, or sometimes we call it patient management meeting, where people like Dr. Ogud, myself, Dr. Kamen, neurosurgeons, neuropsychiatrists, and several other members of the multidisciplinary team come together. We review every case in great detail. What are the pros? What is it that the patient is expecting? How is it that the DBS will help them with those specific areas of disability? Will it help? What are the chances it will? On the other hand, what are the relative contraindications? What could go wrong? Why are these patients potentially at risk of having a complication? And there's a complex discussion on the pros and the cons, and then we come together to make a consensus decision and say this patient is a candidate because of these reasons. And not only that, we decide who is a candidate and who is not a candidate, or somewhere in between, because that can happen too, but also some specific decisions, what target to use. We can put these probes, these leads that part of DBS stimulation in various parts of the brain, depending on the patient's specific symptoms and problems. We can do it on one side, we could do it on both sides, we can do it in a delayed fashion. So there are many of these decisions that the committee can decide, and we also evaluate alternatives. Should there be some medication trial? Should there be another advanced treatment option? Dr. Kamen mentioned Duopa, that's one, but MR-guided focused ultrasound is another one. There are research studies that are looking for patients who also qualify for DBS, such as subcutaneous infusion pumps and other more advanced medications that are being currently tested. So all those options can be reviewed and presented to the patient, and we partner with the patient and their care partner as a team to say, we give you all the information, what the committee decided or said, and here are the pros and cons, and then ultimately it is a mutual choice or decision.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Robert. I wanted to get your perspective on this too. We are talking about brain surgery. If we go back to DBS, a deep brain stimulation, I forgot to mention what that acronym was. And patients could be a little bit fearful of this. And let's not mention that there has been maybe some increased distrust in the medical community and healthcare community, maybe of recent time too. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing resistance to some of this treatment within the patient and the caregiver community?
It's definitely a mixed bag, and I liked what Dr. Mari said, that it's not for everyone to begin with. There's no cure-all, so we have to start with that. I think everybody always wants to find the cure-all, so they'll look for the right magic pill or the right surgery. Everybody, of course, would just like this lifted. So when we look at it reasonably and say, here's what it can do and here are the things it can help with, I think we can have that kind of conversation that benefits everyone. Because for some people, it really is a life changer and makes it wonderful for them. For other people, it's tremendously, like you said, scary, and of course, up to the point of mortality, people dying. So my dad was one who opted not to do the surgery, even though early he was a candidate, and later, when he considered again, he was considered not a candidate. He very simply put it from his perspective that he didn't like the idea of getting drilled into his head. And that's a very primal type feeling, and just the idea that this is what's going to happen. And there's the fear of what you'll do and the fear of what you won't. So what a lot of people with Parkinson's and their care partners like to feel is, what can I do to control this or influence this in a positive way? And I want to go back to something that I heard Dr. Ogu say. She was talking about the voice. Literally, voice therapy for claiming the physical side is a huge part of this, because you can become incredibly socially isolated when you lose your power of speech, and it actually leads potentially toward the number one killer, which is pneumonia for people with Parkinson's. That and falls are the two big risks. So when we talk about what you can do, things like a voice therapy is excellent, and then training on the idea of understanding what's going on inside of you. So the psychological side of that, and that's a program actually Dr. Mari and I have been working on called Day One PD Superheroes, where the people with Parkinson's are gaining a heroic journey, a heroic narrative about what it means to have Parkinson's, using some novel techniques, improvisation and storytelling, and exploring, okay, this is what I have and this is what I can do, and therefore rising up positively as a community to meet their doctors and say, this is what I think I need to advocate appropriately and properly, and understand, is DBS or is this pill or is Duopa or any of these things correct? So these are the type of things that empowerment of the community are incredibly powerful and important.
And Robert, let's talk specifically about some of the resources you listed first. Of course, Parkinson's Place, I'm assuming, is one hub to be able to connect to some of these resources. Is that the best way, going to your website?
Yes, parkinsonsplacelv.org is one, and the other I'd encourage is yesandexercise.com, which has some information on the Day One program as well as the improvisation program. Again, another novel technique to get people feeling better about quality of life issues like depression, anxiety, stigma, communication. All of these things are done in something that is missed often in a joyful way. That actually, the interventions like dance and like boxing for a lot of people, they actually experience joy from this. And, we focus so much on the negative aspects and the things that are detrimental, that sometimes I think we forget that we need to cultivate joy and celebrate what we have. And that means each other, that means the body that we are still able to maintain and upgrade through various choices. So these are things, joy and laughter, of course, a big part of what we do.
And I'll just throw this out to the entire panel here. Let's talk about the general public. If you want to become more educated on a disease like Parkinson's, and back to what Robert had said, we're talking potentially about employers here that might not understand the disease and might think the symptoms are related to other things of a negative nature. What's the best resource to connect with and learn more about this disease?
I think the Michael J. Fox Foundation is a wonderful organization that it provides a lot of material to patients, and also does a lot of funding of trials. So it's a good resource, and has a familiar face, Michael J. Fox, and he vouches for it. So I think that's a good place to start. And Parkinson's Place here, which was already mentioned.
Another good resource that we do have is the Parkinson's Foundation. National Parkinson's Foundation is one. So you can just Google that. The American Parkinson's Foundation is another one. That is a good resource. The Parkinson's Alliance is another good source. So there are so many good sources, and of course our local resource is the Parkinson's Place LV. So those are phenomenal resources to sort of get information about the symptoms and care of Parkinson's disease.
I would
Well,
like to
Dr.
add to
Ogu,
that. Thank you.
yes,
Oh,
please,
sorry,
Robert,
if I
go.
may. Just to
Yes.
say that there is, the local angle and there's the national, and it's really, I think it's great what we're seeing is that they're connecting groups like the Ep48 and the Parkinson's Foundation, Parkinson's Alliance. We're working at Parkinson's Place, Las Vegas, to connect to them to make that a more synonymous type of relationship, so that we can see all these stories interconnect, that Parkinson's has things that are in common and things that are different. And when people feel, okay, I've got someone in Scotland who feels like I do, and someone in Seattle who feels like I do, and this is kind of the silver lining of COVID, being able to come together in this way and say, okay, I'm not alone, because that isolation is the real killer. I think that's the opportunity for people then to say, okay, I heard these things in these other communities. How can I either find or try to cultivate those things in my community here in Southern Nevada? And that's definitely a part of our mission, is to keep growing the things that people want that are going to make their lives better immediately, from a quality of life standpoint.
Absolutely, and I'll just sum up and close our conversation here by mentioning, Robert, the movement fair that you had. In researching the show, I watched part of that, and what a better example virtually of bringing people together, moving and exercising from all over the world. A perfect example that I recommend our audience check that out. And I'm sorry, Dr. Murray, I'll give you the floor too. I know you had something you wanted to add.
I just wanted to add to the conversation in terms of these various organizations that we just listed and their profile and what they do, local, regional, national. And I'd like to point out that the Parkinson's Foundation, in many ways, and Dr. Ogu mentioned it used to be the National Parkinson's Foundation, but then they merged with the Parkinson Disease Foundation, or PDF, to make the Parkinson's Foundation. They really stand out in terms of their overall offerings and outreach. They are now a global organization, and they have developed, with focus on outreach and education in the community, a network of what they call Center of Excellence Network. And there is a very gruesome set of criteria for any practice or university or clinic to apply and qualify for those criteria to become a center of excellence and maintain that accreditation. And this is essentially to show that there are Parkinson and movement disorder specialists, multidisciplinary care, clinical trials and related research, and many other, and then of course significant outreach and education. And we are very proud to be the first in Nevada as a part of the Cleveland Clinic Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence. Dr. Hubert Fernandez on main campus in Ohio is one of the co-directors. I'm the other co-director of the Center of Excellence. And we are really happy and excited and proud to have a first such a Center of Excellence in Nevada. And hopefully this will help the community. We are providing education, we are providing patient and patient caregiver programs, but we are also providing CME. And in fact, One is we are just in the final stretches of putting together a continuous medical education on those non-motor symptoms that Dr. Ogur described earlier for our community and beyond. And we hope to continue this work together with the community.
Very optimistic. So many things are moving in the right direction, it seems, in our state. Very, very great to hear. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Ogu, Dr. Kamen, Dr. Mari, and Robert. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.